Hey, what's up? It's your boy Kwane, aka Ubafana Wagwanyandini. Out here with a different kind of video. Welcome to my first ever book review. Today, we are reviewing a book, y'all. We're expanding uh, the areas in which I'm inviting you guys in. So, over the past, I don't know, what was it, 3 weeks? I was reading this book, so I'm like, since I'm already sharing parts of my life, let me share my thoughts on this book. The book I'll be reviewing today, funny story about how I found it. So I've been going through this thing of reading a lot of dystopian like predictions for the future. I don't know, man. It seems like we're living in a place where the future looks bleak, man. So when I heard about this book and I heard that we can actually dream about better things in the future, we can actually hope for like a better future. I was like, hey, let's change the mindset a bit in order for us to, even for me, to be able to impart and then to do something that would be worthwhile. I need to have like some hope for the future. So this book I've read, I found out about it on the Daily Show, Trevor Noah's Daily Show. It's called Utopia for Realists. You understand, like how my whole view was dystopian, like a future with no hope. And I found this book called Utopia for Realists by a Dutch historian, no less. This guy could have been an economist, but yeah, I think he says he's a historian. His name is Rutger Bregman. He's from the Netherlands. He's Dutch. So what this book is about is centered around the idea of utopia. Utopia being like a dream of, it's like a place. Utopia is like a place, a perfect place wherein you're trying to achieve what's not seemingly possible right now. You know how back then they used to dream of flying cars, and I don't think they dream of a computer in your pockets. So yeah, flying cars, computers in our pockets, no struggle, no poverty. Where manna rained from heaven, where we walked on gold plated streets. That's like the idea of utopia, where you have flying monkeys and flying pigs. Like, however impossible you may think of it, that's what utopia is. Basically, it's like imagining a world that is perfect. So yeah, so in this book, Radga really explained that the idea of a utopia is it's as grand and as impossible as Dr. Emmett's time traveling car, from Back to the Future, or the suffrage of women in the 20th century, because no one thought women could vote or have a say in society, or even dreaming that you could fit an entire computer in your pocket was back in right by the end of World War II. But apart from Dr. Brown's car, at least for now, at least where we are right now, all these impossibilities have come true. Utopia, comprises of all the ideas, impossible or otherwise, that we can dream up for a perfect world. A world without struggle, hunger, inequality, and economic imbalance. The ideas that seek to create a utopia are sometimes so grand that they are only classified as works of fiction derived, by those with a very overactive imagination. So in this book, Rutger takes us on a journey in history. Since he's a historian, I think he was the perfect person to do this. He takes us on a journey through history in order to make these grand ideas more plausible, by not only providing the merits for these ideas, but also providing the evidence in history where some of these ideas have been tried, some of these ideas, have been tested. Even though they worked, there were some challenges that, made them not to become applicable in those times. In our quest to create a better, more harmonious life, this book presents three ideas, all rooted like in the idea of work. Um, and it seeks to make a case for like a universal basic income, open borders, and a 15-hour work week. At face value, and with the current capitalist world, these ideas seem like so far-fetched and scream the inklings of a toddler trying to grasp the world. Or even, if you can look at it, it screams of like a privileged individual not looking at like the whole world, on, like putting the whole world through a magnifying glass. But as I went through this book, I found out that the knee-jerk reaction to hearing universal basic income or even a 15-hour work week, for me and you especially, is that it would inspire a lazy and entitled society. But the evidence presented in the book proves that this is anything but true. In fact, there are cases where these ideas have doubled production and inspired whole communities to build better worlds for themselves and their children. So I think Rutger really got the idea of a utopia and did not just, okay, for the most part, did not just let these ideas just remain ideas, but he offered up solutions that in some of the things that he presented, like in those three ideas, in how he presented them, it seems like he was just presenting economic case studies to say this is possible. It's not even that impossible. It's not even that far-fetched. There's actual cases where this can work. There's actual cases where something this huge has worked before. So I'm just gonna go through, these ideas that he presented in this book, which are exceptionally well. Let's start with making how he made a case for a 15-hour work week. It's interesting to think that in the early 20th century, the greatest economics, when asked, not even a utopian question, just what they think the future would be, how he presented it, even starts with it. It's when asked the greatest economics of the 20th century, what they think the greatest challenge of the 21st century would be. The basic answer was leisure. Leisure would be our greatest challenge. We'll have so much free time that we won't know what to do with it, because of, they saw the technological advances and how the world was heading up, and the only thing to think was, we will have so much free time that we will need to be able to fit in anyway. We won't have to have this idea of our ideals and our personalities to fit a mold of work, which is now the complete opposite of what has happened in the 21st century. We have placed the idea of this is just my interpretation of this chapter. We have placed the idea of the hustler economics, or this grind. You always need to be on the grind, always need to work. We have placed it on the forefront that now leisure and the term that time is money actually feels like time is actual money. You can't sit down and not be doing anything to generate an income. You can't sit down and not be doing anything, to propel your work. So that's why in the 70s, 60s, when you mentioned, not even then, before, when the work week could go up to 70 hours a week without holidays or working throughout all the weekends, So these ideas were engraved in that in order for us to increase production, in order for us to increase profit, the poor need to work. You need to be at work, for you to be able to play a part in society, which I've always struggled with. How am I working 7 days a week for a life I can't even enjoy? You know what I'm saying? So that's exactly what this is presented as. So it was not, I think it was, he said 1930s, around the 1930s. So Rutger presented a case in the 15-hour work week where he said it's different businessmen were put in the room to, gauge what they thought of reducing the work week, reducing the number of hours that people work. And out of the 30, only 2 were yeah, we would consider that. That seems to have some merit to it. So, because everyone was no, as soon as you give people more time outside of work, then they will be lazy, they won't work anymore, or they won't see the need to work anymore because they have so much time, then they will be lazy, production will stall. So, it was not until Henry Ford, the inventor of the actual production line that has been used in so many different factories right now, that he, outside of this whole group of businessmen, he introduced a 5-day work week. So thank you, Henry Ford. And because of what the idea was behind the idea of working as much as you can, what Henry Ford found out by the reduction in the work week was that he could actually increase productivity amongst his employees, because his employees will be well rested. There'll be fewer accidents, and fewer stalls in the production. So this was actually a benefit back into the production line for him in terms of like the savings that he could get. So he even said his quote was, a well rested worker was a more effective worker. This is one of my favorite things about how Henry Ford approached this idea of a shorter work week. It was not, for instance, to say he did it because he cared about his employees. No, he was still a capitalist at heart. So the main thing was, if my employees are toiling here at a factory from dawn till dusk with no free time for road trips and joint rides, who'd ever buy my cars? Which is like a practical thing, which is exactly what I'm saying. Like, if we work 7 days a week with no free time in between and can't even enjoy the life that we're working for, what's the basic idea of work then? Why are we working if we're only working just for work's sake? So, which is why I think this whole book finds its premise and its foundation on the whole idea of work. Because in a capitalist society, you need people to work and you need the rich to provide jobs and employment and salaries for all of these societies to work. So we also need to rethink and reshape how we look at the idea of work in how it affects our lives. This idea of um, placing so much of our ideas and so much of our personalities behind work is really not working out right now, because we get exhausted. We can't even produce um, up to the level which we are known to be capable of. So he even made Rutger, in the chapter on the 15-hour work week, he even made an example about how in the 80s to 90s, Apple workers would brag about wearing t-shirt that says I work 90-hour work weeks, which is like, yeah, but if you read this, you should know that you're not supposed to work, or not supposed to even be proud of working 90-hour work weeks, because you're not even gonna use the product that you so proudly work for 90-hour work weeks for. So, and what I found, so back in like the 20th century, they tried, even governments tried, to reduce. They kept on reducing the work week over and over, due to how the case study from Henry Ford and even Kellogg's, the manufacturer, um, reduced their work, because the case for Kellogg's is that they reduced their work days to only 6 hours a week, which now we work like 8 to 9 hours a day. So they're working 6 hours a day, to reduce also the work week, also to increase production line, because it works. If it works, why not use it? So the governments also try to implement that on like a larger scale, but because government politics and all the pulls, what they didn't think of, and this is also why I love a book like this being written by a historian, because what happened was, on there they even managed to reduce working hours to like 30 hours a week, and the plan was still to go down further. But when women gained, or women were allowed to get jobs now, and women were gained their suffrage and were able to vote and play part in society, what they found was there was now not enough time in between, in order to feed the women and feed the men, around that 15-hour work week. There was not enough time to take care of the house. No one was there to take care of the home, and production stalled, because now we have more women coming into the work market, and then men fearing that they might lose, which he goes on to prove in this book, that they might lose some of their jobs because of the new workforce that's coming. So, okay, I'm jumping the gun here, but how he proved this idea is that um, the more people you have in the workforce, the more you have to create new industries. The more freedom you have to create new industries, which is what we've actually seen from the 80s to the 2012. How many new industries have been introduced now, because we have more workforce we have more people coming into the workforce and joining the workforce. So that's why. So because women could not now do all the things that they were doing, like cleaning, taking care of the kids, the work week, it seemed like, okay, this needs to be cut down now, in order to not allow them to in order to not allow people to still have these ideas outside of work for working living space. So they even increased, right now where we stand, they went on to increase the work week. And this was inspired by even a series, like a comedy series called Meet the Jason, where in like it's set up in the future, right? And the husband can work for like 6 hours a week, and because the wife is there, he comes back all jolly. But because now in that ideal, when they were trying to increase the work hours, in that ideal, the wife, Jane Jetson, didn't have a job. Everything else was fine. But because of our present, everyone can work. Everyone is allowed the opportunity to play a part in society. The Jetsons fairy tale becomes not just that, a fairy tale, because women are not just subservient anymore. We still now we are pressed for so much time because we're still pushing the idea of hustler economics, of always trying to work, 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 and outwork everyone else. So we need, how he presents it is not just to go from 40 hours a week, which is what we work now, to directly to what 15 hours a week, like the utopians thought. Like John Keynes, the economist, one of the economists in the 1930s, once thought that Utopia would be only working for 14 hours a week. But because of that, we need to now rethink, even reduce it by 10 hours, to go back to 30 hours and then see. Because the main thing is production lines are getting more and more automated, and we won't have places for people to work in if we just keep on increasing the hours. Production lines are, this is why now we still have like slave for workforces and sweatshops in China, India, even Africa, because of this idea that you have to work around the clock because of this consumer society. So if we are in a society where we consume more than we produce, then we always want to produce more, and in order for us to produce more than we consume, we have to increase the amount of hours that we spend in producing. So which is why you have sweatshops, you have slave workers. So until we rethink the idea of one, our consumerism, and the way we consume and produce products, then we can rethink the idea of a 15-hour work week. So Rutger continued to introduce. I think I've been hearing talks about this one for past 2 years now. The idea of like a basic universal income. And funny enough, the first time I heard about this idea was from Elon Musk, when he was talking about the future and how the introduction of AI, and how most of the jobs are going to be be completely automated. Most of the jobs that we have now, they're going to be completely automated. In order for us to completely eradicate the idea of poverty, and in order for the guys who are losing their jobs, so the people who are losing their jobs, to not feel left out of a society, then we need to look at introducing a like across the board basic income. So this, in his idea, in Elon Musk's idea, is that the basic income will help us in order to be able to live in a world where our hands are not needed for work anymore, where we have machines doing all the work for us. And in Rutger's case, he presented a case where in the 80s, 1800s, the 19th century, when with the introduction of farming mills and churning machines, a lot of people lost their jobs due to machines being able to do the job of five people. One machine being able to do the job of five people, and because a machine, you don't only need to buy it once, you don't need to pay it every month. It became like it was easier for people to lose their jobs. So the idea now, you see how you link those back in the 1800s, and now we're still faced with the same race against the machine type of idea right now. So the idea is we don't see machines as the enemy, but we see it as giving us freedom, one, for leisure, like the same leisure that was talked about by John Keynes, and being able to afford to live in a society that is completely automated. So, but in Rutger's case, in making the case for a basic universal income, the main point is, elevating and removing the poverty line. So what we have now, we have what we call a welfare trap. So in that, we have categories of people who are poor, and because we have all these categories, they call it deserving poor. So if you have welfare, like the country gives welfare to people who are poor, disabled, or who can't work for some other reason. Because of these different criteria that you have to meet, a lot of people would want to what we call the welfare trap. People want to stay in that system for a long time, because as soon as you get a job and you get cut out of welfare, your job will pay you minimum wage, and minimum wage can't even uh, afford you like a life that your job is supposed to afford you, because you are still within the poverty line, but you are not just below it so that you can afford welfare, because now you have a job. So the idea of a basic income is that at the poverty line for each individual country. So for South Africa, I think our poverty line right now is at 1,200 a month, um, give or take some hundred rands. So the basic idea of a basic universal income would be to give everyone in, regardless of whether they work or not, give everyone in the country like the universal basic income of, say, at the poverty line 1,200. So even if someone gets a job after, gets a job, if they were unemployed, gets a job in that 1,200, you don't take it away, because one, universal basic income does not have strings to say you need to get a job by this time, you need to spend this money here, here, here. And because of that, you'll be able then to play in this very expensive capitalist world, where you have to get a job, you have to pay for transport, you have to pay for rent, you have to pay for food, fuel. All of these things accumulate, and that's why we now have so much debt in this century. So in order to alleviate this, we need to give people free money, because we have this money. So there's this part in the book where he says, we've played the game of capitalism so much that we finally won the game. We have so much money that we can completely eradicate poverty if we really want to. So another idea is that a lot of people would think, oh, a lot of aid and organizations have this idea that the more you give people money, the more they become lazy, the more they don't want to work. So he made examples of where, I think in the Netherlands, yes, they found a group of 13 homeless people, and then they gave them each money. I think it was $1,300 to do whatever they want with it. There was no strings attached saying you can't buy this, you have to move here. And what they found was, like, because of homeless people, and you have to always chase them, you have to spend money on social work, you have to spend money on courts and removing them from the city only for them to come back and break the law. So because all of these things were now not there, with this money, people were able to, even the guys who were addicted to drugs, people were able to alleviate their own circumstances. Some even got the places to stay, some even changed their lives, just because of this trial of like 1 year of giving people free money for 1 year. Even with charity organizations giving people money and saying, no, we know what poor people want. What the idea here in this book is that if you stop trying to think for the poor, and instead just give them the money and let them decide what they want for themselves, you'll find that a lot of people come up with innovative ways to make sure that they don't go back to like below the poverty line. They because they have the money, they have the means. You can teach people how to save money, how to work with money. You can give people so much economic education, but if they don't have money, that economic education is just gonna go down the drain, because at the end of the day, what poor people need is not more education, but what they need is money. So give them the money and let them work out of it. And I feel like this is a really great way for us to eradicate poverty, like on a global scale, especially if every country, especially the developing ones, play their part in ensuring that this is done in order to eradicate this poverty and all these things, and in order for us to move to a utopian society. So my biggest takeaway from this book, right, just from those presentation, I know, a reduced work week, free money for everyone, is that these are not just impossible ideas. These are practical ideas with actual. So if you read the book, you'll find actual case studies from the 1800s, from the 13th century to even now the 21st century, of studies that were done not just in remote locations, studies that were done in Canada, studies that were done in America, in Europe, where giving people money and reducing the work week and introducing new ideas to people has actually worked. It's just that there's always a pull from society, from anything that brings about change that we are not ready for. So yeah, it's not really a utopian for utopian's sake. It's not. We're not. My favorite thing about Rutger here is not just dreaming up about flying cars, not just dreaming about flying pigs and gold-plated roads. It's dreaming up about a society where everyone can be able to be afforded a life in a capitalist society that we've created. I'm sure we said we do not want communism. We said we don't want socialism. But now, in a capitalist society, we need to rethink the idea of a capitalist society in order to grab borrow from communism, borrow from socialism, in order to make capitalism work for everyone. Because right now, there's a huge inequality gap. The more we develop, the more we have, the more people lag on like the bottom of the food chain. So this book is great for, because I have this question here of like who should read this book, and I feel like for one, the main ones are policymakers. Policymakers need to read this book in such a way that they look beyond what your present economics say, what your present. I'm sure there's this thing of a 5-year term, a 5-year presidential term. So we need policymakers who see beyond like a 5-year term and into the future to say, okay, I understand now. If we introduce a basic universal income now, we might lose for like the next 5 years. But what's going to happen over the next 100 years will be better than what we're going to lose. What we're going to gain over the next 100 years is going to be better than what we're going to lose now. So all of these ideas, the ideas of work, the ideas of salary, and how much we have to work, they all come down to the fact that what values do we place in humans, and how many things do we need to change. So also, apart from policymakers, I feel like everyone now who has really lost hope of a future should really read this and look forward to like a utopian future where all of these things are possible. Not only possible, but they have to be done in this generation by us right now. Because we have all of these things: climate change, inequality, expensive fuel. Right now, everything seems like it's going to hell. But if we let it go to hell, it's gonna be back to like medieval ages where people were really hungry. Because it says, I like how you introduced the idea of utopia. It says back then people were hungry, stupid, ugly, and broke. So because of that, all of these sicknesses were dealing with them. But now, because of where we are in society, we are like, if you were to take someone from the 12th century and bring them here, they would really think we are really in utopia, because we are now smarter, we are now prettier, we are full, we are no longer as poor as we were. So because of that, we still need to look forward to a future where all of these things are achievable, where poverty is completely eradicated on a global scale and not just on developed nations. So it's a very brilliant book. I don't even think my review um, does it much justice, but I do feel like it's still steeped in. There's some places where you feel like it's for the first world more than anything. For the developing world or the third world, it's gonna take an intentional leader to really find these ideas and apply them. So he could have made it, or we could revise it for our circumstances, like in South Africa, for instance, where like really the inequality is like that of the first world to the third world in just one country. So we need to be able to revise these ideas here and then implement them here on like a national scale. So it's a great book. If you can find it, please go read it. It's Utopia for Realists. I hope you enjoyed that. My first book review. I know it's long-winded, some ideas, because this book is really has all those ideas. So I hope you found something. And if you do find this book, please let me know what you thought of it, and please let me know what other books do you think I can read around the idea of turning capitalism on its head to, you know, to make sure that it benefits everyone. Because I mean, we already live in a capitalist society, so we can't just uproot completely. So please let me know what books you're reading. Suggest books that I could read. Even if it's fiction, I feel like more fiction has a lot of things that are applicable in our future. So thank you so much for tuning in. It's been your boy Kwane, aka Bafaning, and please don't forget to subscribe. Until next video, peace.